case of one of the magazines that I read, and one of the biggest stories. I'm sorry if you can hear dogs. I feel like I can hear them. I can't hear them I don't know if I can hear them in my headphones. I really hope you can't hear them. Anyway. So, one of the biggest stories from this magazine article, I had never actually heard of it, but it seems to be quite a big story. And the title of the story is The Taxi Driver from Hell. So, I thought I would read it to you and share it with you, because I actually don't think I've seen any videos about this case either. So, yeah, I really hope they enjoy this. I love videos like this, just kind of whispered videos, and I know that's the majority of what I do. So I hope you enjoy it too. Yeah, I'm just gonna start reading from it over here. I'm gonna have to scroll, so I'll be looking over here. Yeah. So, before I do start reading, as always, please, viewer discretion is advised, and if true crime is not for you, or anything relating to true crime makes you uncomfortable, please do click off the video now and hopefully come back for something different. Okay, so this is called The Taxi Driver from Hell. What started as the search for missing Sian O'Callaghan led to the discovery of a serial killer, the end of a direct detective's career, and a first for British justice. It was the 10th day of the excavation and still no body had been found. 10 days of grinding solid concrete, breaking it up, sifting through the rubble, looking, hoping to find a missing woman. Some in the forensic team were convinced they would find human remains. Others were not so sure. The killer who wouldn't have been so foolish to leave a corpse in his own property, would he? That wasn't how he operated. He was forensically aware, clever. Officers shovelled the waste earth and concrete into large plastic wheelie bins. The bins were loaded onto the back of trucks and driven away. Security guards quickly opened the barrier at the end of the alleyway to allow the lorries out, which sped past the press pack on the street that waited eagerly for any news, any development. Police had hoped to carry out the dig quietly without reporters finding out, but the property's former resident was big news, and word of the excavation had leaked out. Then the reporters, cameramen and satellite trucks turned up. One company even hired a cherry picker to gain an aerial shot of the search. The garbage being dug up was in a back alley in the Manchester Road area of Swindon, the town's red light district lined with Victoria terraces, yet to enjoy love, care, restoration or gentrification. At night there is a woman on every corner. In the 2000s, many of the prostitutes knew Taxi Cab Chris. Christopher Halliwell was and remains a man who cast a long shadow over his town. He was a friendly neighbour, a family man, a doting father, a taxi driver entrusted by parents to ferry their children, their daughters, to and from school. He was also a forensically aware psychopath who sexually assaulted and killed at least 2 women, who avoided detection and justice for years, and who made British legal history as the first convicted killer to defend himself in a second murder trial. But he may never have been caught had it not been for the daring gamble made by the unorthodox and free-thinking detective. If this police officer had not broken the rules and not torn up arrest guidelines in his search for the killer, perhaps Halliwell would still be driving young vulnerable women around his hometown. It's possible Halliwell would not have had a fleeting flash of guilt, a moment of mea culpa, and the bodies of 2 young women he killed would never have been after his family and friends finally discovered that this kindly and unremarkable figure was in fact a psychopathic murderer. Searching for Sian. Sian O'Callaghan was a 22-year-old office worker. She was slim and pretty with dark hair and a radiating smile. Her boyfriend Kevin Reap had gone to the races on Cheltenham Gold Cup Day with his football team. Sian went out with her girlfriends in Swindon's Old Town. They went to a couple of bars and Sian had a good night, drinking heavily. They ended up in a Japanese-themed club called Suju at 2:47am. Sian left the nightclub alone. Footage from the club's security cameras shows Sian leaving through a corridor, tottering downstairs and then exiting the front door, then she disappeared. By this time, Kevin had sent her a text message, but she didn't reply. The couple had just moved into a flat together. She wasn't there when he got home, nor was she there when he awoke briefly in the middle of the night. And when he got up bleary-eyed in the morning, she still wasn't there. This wasn't like Sian. Kevin called Sian's parents, and soon her whole family and wide network of friends were trying to get hold of her. Their efforts came to nothing, so they called the police. Wiltshire police were concerned about Sian's disappearance from the first call. Soon they would escalate it from a simple missing persons inquiry, and the head of the force's serious crime unit would be in charge. His name was Detective Superintendent Steve Fulcher, and he was an able and eloquent detective. With a master's degree in criminology from the University of Cambridge and an easy on-screen manner with the media, he got a distinctive figure. As in most modern police investigations, Fulcher had two strong starting points: telephony and security film. Soon he discovered that Sian's mobile had been connected to a mast in central Swindon until the early hours of Saturday morning. But then, after her disappearance, it was picked up by a mast 16 kilometres south of the town centre, near Savernake Forest. Sian had no reason to be anywhere near Savernake. Her home was a kilometre away from the nightclub in a neighbouring district. Then came the CCTV. The club film showed her leaving through the front doors. Officers quickly found more of her heading into the night. The film shows her walking unsteadily along the pavement. A car drives along slowly on the other side of the road. Then it performs a U-turn, the headlights glaring directly into the camera, obscuring the vehicle. Sian looks into the passenger window, gets in, and is driven away. This was the last sighting of Sian O'Callaghan alive. Analysis of footage from this camera and from others nearby showed that this vehicle had been circling the area for a while. When a check was made of Wiltshire Police's automatic number plate recognition cameras on their squad cars, they managed to identify it and its driver. The car was a dark green Toyota Avensis Estate. It had taxicab markings and was registered to a 47-year-old who lived in the Swindon suburbs. His name was Christopher Halliwell. Police records showed that Halliwell was not an apparently dangerous man. He was a father of 3, and although he had spent a bit of time in prison 25 years earlier, after a burglary conviction, it was nothing violent. Fulcher hit upon a two-pronged plan to catch Halliwell. First, he ordered 24-hour surveillance on the suspect. Second, he would use the media to pressurise and confuse him. The nation's press had already started reporting on Sian's disappearance. She had vanished just a few weeks after Joanna Yates had gone missing in Bristol. That story had gone on to make international headlines. Even though Joanna's killer had been arrested, the nation was gripped by stories of young women disappearing into the night. A press conference was arranged and Sian's family pleaded for her return. Kevin Reap broke down in tears as he appealed for her to get in touch. This emotional plea and Fulcher's revelation at the press conference that Sian's mobile had been located in Savernake created a feverish response from people in the town. At first light the next day, a small group of amateur searchers started making their way through the historic forest. Within hours, the group grew. Bushes were laid on from Swindon to Savernake. Most of the people were strangers. Few had never heard the name Sian O'Callaghan 36 hours before. By the end of that day, police estimated that 600 people had taken part in the hunt. However, nothing was found. Away from the very public search, Fulcher's secret plan was progressing. Undercover officers watched Halliwell's every move. He was seen washing his car, removing seat covers as he did. Then they followed him as he headed into the night. They saw him throwing items away, burning things under moonlight. Detective Superintendent Fulcher was worried. He'd been in a position before on another case regarding a missing woman. During that case, they had had the suspect and he'd committed suicide, an attempt to take his murderer's secret to the grave. Fulcher worried that if Halliwell died, they may never find Sian, whether she was alive or dead. Soon, Fulcher's fears were proved right. Surveillance team watched the taxi driver go into a chemist and buy boxes of pills. They decided to strike. As Detective Superintendent Fulcher paced the operations room in the police station, 2 officers seized Halliwell in a supermarket car park. They arrested him and cautioned him. "I want to go to the police station. I want a solicitor," said Halliwell. Detective Superintendent Fulcher phoned through. Had Halliwell said anything? "No," came the reply from his junior. What followed reads like scenes from a TV drama. It is the moment the detective let his maverick urges take over in the spectacular backdrop of the West Country Hills. Instead of agreeing that Halliwell should be questioned at the police station, Fulcher ordered he be taken to Barbary Castle, an Iron Age hill fort south of Swindon. It is an ancient earthworks, remote and bleak. Fulcher knew Sian's phone had used the mast nearby before its battery had drained. Halliwell could be keeping her there, he thought, but the suspect had a right to remain silent, and he had exercised that solemn privilege that is provided to all suspects under British law. The night before, Fulcher had been told of an urgent interview process. This had been used when there is an immediate threat to life, but is normally confined to use in terrorism cases. The detective argued that Sian's life was immediately threatened. They didn't know if she was dead. If Halliwell was keeping her alive, surely this was the best way to unlock the case. Fulcher's juniors had doubts, and so did his boss, but he went ahead. Halliwell was driven to Barbary Castle. Fulcher was too. They met in the car park, detective and suspect one-to-one. It was a final attempt to persuade Halliwell to confess, although he admitted it would be sailing close to the wind with arrest guidelines. Fulcher asked what Halliwell had done to Sian, and he said confessing would be the right thing to do for Sian, for Halliwell, and for Halliwell's family. He mentioned the Joanna Yates case and told Halliwell the press were watching his every move. In a few hours, Fulcher told him, "You will be vilified." He also promised he could make arrangements for Halliwell's family. "Do you have a car? We'll go," said Halliwell. At this point, Fulcher did not read Halliwell his rights again, and Halliwell was giving evidence. He directed police through country lanes, arriving eventually at a roadside verge beneath the chalk Uffington White Horse, over the county boundary in Oxfordshire. Halliwell was keen to make clear that he had not had sex with her. The detective thanked the defendant and said a junior would read Halliwell his rights. It was at this point the killer told the detective, "We need to have a chat." Fulcher instructed the driver to take him to Uffington White Horse nearby. The car climbed a steep hill and pulled over next to a path. The detective and killer got out and walked about 30 metres away and sat down. Fulcher gave Halliwell a cigarette and asked him, "What do you want to tell me?" "I'm a sick. Is it too late to get help?" Halliwell replied. Fulcher told him, "It's gone beyond that, Chris." Halliwell then revealed that he had killed another woman in the early 2000s. When Fulcher asked where the body of his other victim was, Halliwell told him it was in Eastleigh on the other side of Lechdale-on-Thames. Fulcher had no idea there were even any outstanding missing women. Halliwell said he had taken a prostitute from the red light district of Swindon and told the detective he would be able to take him to the exact spot where he would find her. Fulcher had not read Halliwell his rights again, although he had been cautioned in the supermarket car park hours before. Since then, he had been driven first to Barbary Castle, then to Uffington. The procedures say that at the beginning of each new interview, the caution must be given, but still Halliwell directed Fulcher and his team 30 kilometres away across into Gloucestershire Cotswolds. They arrived at a crossroads in the countryside. There was a field with an old dry stone wall. Halliwell got out of the car and found a dip in the wall. He used it as a reference point and paced into the field toe to heel. Then he stopped and said his first victim was there, 5 feet down. Halliwell said he didn't know the victim's name, but after having sex with her, he had strangled and stripped her. He'd left her naked body in the bushes at the side of the field, then returned the following night to bury it. Fulcher had nothing with which to mark the spot, so he told a junior officer to stand there, and the two men left the field. It was then and only then that Halliwell was formally cautioned for the first time since his arrest at the supermarket car park hours before. He was driven back to the police station and provided with a lawyer. When he was next interviewed, his answer to every question was no comment. Hours after the confession, in a press conference, there was a gasp from a packed room when Fulcher told reporters a man had been arrested for not one but 2 murders. Days later, the skeletal remains of a young woman were found in the field. The DNA would link them to 20-year-old Becky Godden Edwards, who had last been seen in Swindon in January 2003. Soon, the high-flying detective would be reaching new heights. He was feted. In the press, he was nominated for a Queen's Police Medal, and he was seconded to the National Police Improvement Agency, acting as a consultant on all serious cases in southern England. It wasn't long before the cracks started to show. Halliwell got a lawyer, a good one, Richard Latham QC, the prosecutor of the Soham killer, Ian Huntley. He argued to a judge that Fulcher had used oppression to obtain Halliwell's confession. The judge agreed, telling them that Halliwell's admission could not be put to a jury. In 2012, Mrs. Justice Cox ruled the whole series of events began with a deliberate decision by a senior officer to breach the arrest codes. However, the police still had evidence about Sian, the CCTV of his car and his DNA on her chest. He would later admit her murder at Bristol Crown Court in 2012, but Becky, the charge was effectively dropped. So was Detective Superintendent Fulcher. As the wheels came off the investigation, his secondment was terminated. He returned to Wiltshire Police, but then despite warnings about inappropriate briefings with the media, he met this reporter for a coffee in a countryside cafe. By chance, a former workmate was at the next table. Detective Superintendent Fulcher was suspended. In the meantime, Becky's father had made a complaint to the police watchdog. The Independent Police Complaints Complaints Commission. He had been unhappy that Becky's mother, his ex-wife, had been contacted about her death, whereas he was being, as he saw it, sidelined. The IPCC investigated the claims made and agreed that Fulcher had a case to answer for gross misconduct. At a hearing in January 2014, Fulcher was found guilty on 2 counts of gross misconduct. He was given a final written warning but kept his job. However, his managers could not find a role for which he would be suitable. He resigned months later. Mr. Fulcher looked at jobs in Britain, but no one would hire him, he said. He described himself as being persona non grata. Then came an offer. Working in North Africa as a security consultant on Fulcher's first trip in Libya. The building next to his was hit with a bomb. Or was hit in a bomb attack. His next role would be in Somalia. He has spent the last 3 years working in Mogadishu. Becky's case continued to be investigated. A new team looked again at the old evidence and came up with new ammunition for a court case. When Halliwell was arrested back in 2011, a spade had been seized from his garden shed. The new senior investigator found a forensic scientist who could prove that the earth on the spade's blade matched that from the Gloucestershire field in which Becky was buried, 30 kilometres away from Halliwell's home. Halliwell tried to do a deal with the police. He said he would admit killing Becky if they would leave him alone. Then a former prostitute came forward to say she knew Becky, and in a run-up to her disappearance, a man called taxi driver Chris became besotted with the victim. She knew that taxi driver Chris was Christopher Halliwell. In September 2016, a jury found Halliwell guilty of murdering Becky, 13 years after she had vanished and 5 years after she was found. But there was to be another twist. In court, Halliwell defended himself. He was shambolic in the dock, trying to keep pace with an experienced prosecuting QC. In the witness box, he concocted an unbelievable story about how he knew Becky was in the field. Steve Fulcher was called as a witness. The 2 men, the former detective and the lifer, saw each other for the first time since their meeting in March 2011. The press gallery was packed. Mr. Fulcher appeared nervous, yet spoke with his strong, deep voice as he answered Halliwell's questions over the confession. Then, as Mr. Fulcher was about to leave, Halliwell said to him, "One more thing. It was a pleasure ruining your career." Steve Fulcher has lost his reputation, career, money, and suffered health problems since that day he gained a killer's confession. He said that he followed the principles laid down for lead officers dealing with kidnap. He argued, what is more important, a victim's right to life or a killer's right to silence? He said, despite everything that has happened to me, I can't regret the decision I took that day. Ultimately, that decision ensured the return of 2 beautiful young women, which brought comfort to their families and ensured that Halliwell has been duly convicted of both murders. Had I not acted as I did, neither Sian nor Becky would ever have been found, and Halliwell would be free to abduct and kill other girls. I want to ensure that any senior investigating officer faced with crimes in action is able to take the right decision without suffering the repercussions I experienced while performing my duty. Mr. Fulcher published his memoirs of the case in 2017. He believes Halliwell has killed many other women. However, Wiltshire police have made a detailed study of Halliwell's life and cannot prove any other murders. Becky's family remains divided. Her father, John Godden, asks how can a detective with decades of experience fail to caution a suspect. But Karen Edwards, Becky's mother, has a to thank from the bottom of my heart Steve Fulcher for bringing my little girl home. I will always respect him and will be indebted to him for making that moral decision as a police officer, but he should not have suffered the terrible consequences, reputation and career for doing so. However, there are questions that remain over Halliwell. What prompted him to kill? How could he lead such a compartmentalised life? How could one part of Halliwell be a genuinely loving and devoted father, yet also be a brutal, controlling psychopath who stabbed and sexually assaulted his dying victims? Questions also remain over whether he had just 2 victims and why those deaths occurred 8 years apart. Had he murdered any other young women between Becky and Sian or before 2003? This takes us back to the most recent search at Halliwell's former home in Swindon. The garage with a broken up concrete floor. No remains were found. No belongings from a disappeared woman. Only one person knows how many people Chris Halliwell has killed. The soft-spoken family man who is serving a life sentence for 2 murders. So, that is the end of that story. Let me know in the comments what you thought about this, and if you enjoy this